In the vast expanse of the Galactic Council, where species from across 1,000 worlds gather to maintain peace and order, there exists an unspoken truth that has echoed through the corridors of power for millennia: humans are expendable. They are the galaxy's janitors, the laborers nobody else wants to be, the species so unremarkable that they're often forgotten in important meetings. So when Princess Zarathul of the proud Veltar Empire, a woman whose bloodline has ruled for over 3,000 years, was declared barren by the finest medical minds in the galaxy, the council saw an opportunity for what they called diplomatic humor. Why not send this defective royal to live among the most primitive species in known space? After all, what harm could come from pairing a sterile alien princess with a simple human male on some backwater planet called Earth? The joke was supposed to be on both of them. The punchline, as it turned out, would rewrite the very foundations of galactic civilization. Because there's something the council had never bothered to learn about humans, something that would make their cruel jest backfire in ways that would shake the stars themselves. Sometimes the most extraordinary miracles happen in the most ordinary places, and sometimes the species everyone underestimates holds the key to everything the galaxy thought it knew about life, love, and the impossible. The crystalline spires of the Veltar capital pierced the violet sky like frozen lightning, their surfaces reflecting the twin suns that had watched over the empire for countless generations. Within the highest tower, Princess Zarathul stood before a window that offered a view of her entire world, yet she had never felt more disconnected from it. "The tests are conclusive, Your Highness," Dr. Methros said behind her, his forearms nervously adjusting the datapad that contained her genetic analysis. "The royal fertility genes that have blessed your family for 3 millennia are simply not present in your DNA sequence." Zara's golden skin shimmered with bioluminescent patterns that betrayed her emotional state, despite her attempts to remain composed. The Veltar were known throughout the galaxy for their ability to control these displays, but grief had a way of overwhelming even royal training. 3,000 years, she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of generations. 3,000 years of unbroken succession, and it ends with me. Her father, Emperor Kethval, had died in the War of 7 Sons, leaving her as the sole heir to the throne. But what was a throne worth if there would be no one to inherit it after her? The Veltar constitution was clear: a ruler without heirs could not maintain the crown past their 50th year. At 32, she had 18 years to produce a successor or watch her empire crumble into the chaos of civil war. "Perhaps," Dr. Methros ventured carefully, "we could explore options with genetic compatibility across species lines?" The medical advances in cross-species fertility have been remarkable in recent decades. Zara turned from the window, her violet eyes reflecting a pain that went deeper than mere disappointment. "I have already submitted to compatibility testing with 17 different species, Doctor. The Ultuiran nobility, the Zenthari merchant princes, even the warrior clans of Drakmor. The results are always the same." She moved to her desk, where reports from across the galaxy lay scattered like fallen leaves. Each one represented a potential marriage alliance, a diplomatic solution that might preserve her empire. Each one had been marked with the same red symbol of genetic incompatibility. "There is, however, one possibility we have not yet explored," the doctor said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Zara looked up sharply. "What possibility?" Dr. Methros activated his datapad, and holographic displays filled the air between them. "The humans of Earth. They are genetically unusual. Their DNA is remarkably adaptable, almost chaotically so. It's crude, unpredictable, but it has shown some surprising interactions in preliminary studies." "Humans?" Zara's bioluminescent patterns shifted to display her disbelief. "The primitives who haven't even achieved faster than light travel on their own? The species the Council uses for manual labor? I understand your reservations, Your Highness. But their genetic structure is so fundamentally different from ours that normal compatibility rules may not apply. It's a theoretical possibility at best, but given your situation." Zara stood silent for a long moment, weighing the implications. To even suggest such a union would be scandalous. The Veltar were one of the founding species of the Galactic Council, their civilization spanning hundreds of worlds. Humans were barely considered sentient by most galactic standards. "Have you discussed this with anyone else?" she asked finally. Only with the research team, and they are bound by medical confidentiality. But, Your Highness, I must warn you that even if genetic compatibility were possible, the political ramifications would be severe. The noble houses would never accept a half-human heir. Zara's expression hardened. Doctor, I am facing the extinction of a 3,000-year dynasty. Political ramifications are a luxury I can no longer afford. 3 days later, the request was submitted to the Galactic Council for approval. It was a formal petition for experimental diplomatic marriage under the Genetic Preservation Protocol, a rarely used provision that allowed for cross-species unions in cases of species endangerment. The council chamber erupted in laughter. Councillor Vrex of the Altuiran Federation was the first to speak, his serpentine body undulating with mirth. The proud princess of Veltar wishes to mate with a human? Perhaps we should suggest she try breeding with the cleaning droids as well? It's absurd on its face, agreed Councillor Thane, her crystalline features refracting the chamber's light into rainbow patterns. Humans are useful for labor, but they're hardly suitable for preserving noble bloodlines. Chancellor Koroth, the ancient leader of the council, raised one massive scaled hand for silence. His species had guided galactic affairs for over 5,000 years, and his words carried the weight of cosmic law. The petition is filed under legitimate protocols, he rumbled, his voice like distant thunder. But, perhaps there is an opportunity here for education. The chamber grew quiet, all eyes on the Chancellor. The Princess of Veltar has always been headstrong, he continued. Perhaps a period among the humans would provide her with perspective on her true place in the galactic order. And, when she returns, having experienced the futility of her request, she will be more amenable to accepting the Council's guidance and selecting a more appropriate successor. You're suggesting we actually approve this farce? Councillor Vrex asked, his amusement clear. I'm suggesting we allow the princess to learn a valuable lesson about the natural order of things. She will be assigned to a human male on Earth for a period of 1 galactic standard year. When she returns, empty-handed and humbled, the Veltar Empire will be ready to accept Council administration. The vote was unanimous. What the council saw as a cruel joke disguised as diplomacy, Zara received as her only remaining hope. 2 weeks later, she stood in the transportation bay of her royal flagship, preparing for the journey to a small blue world in what humans called the Milky Way galaxy. Her belongings had been reduced to a single case, her royal guard dismissed, her titles temporarily suspended. Your Highness, Captain Nethal said softly, it's not too late to withdraw the petition. Zara looked at her oldest friend and most trusted advisor. They had served together for 15 years, through war and peace, triumph and defeat. Now she was leaving him behind to venture into the unknown. Do you know what my father told me the day before he died in battle? She asked. The captain shook his head. He said that sometimes the greatest victories come from the battles everyone else thinks you've already lost. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her bioluminescent pattern shifting to a warm, fond gold. I'm not going to Earth to fail, old friend. I'm going to save our empire. As her transport ship broke away from the flagship and began its journey toward the Sol system, Zara stared out at the stars and wondered if she was brave or simply desperate. The distinction, she realized, might not matter. Far below in the communications center of her flagship, a message was being transmitted to Earth's planetary government. It was brief, formal, and contained information that would change 2 lives forever. Galactic Council assigns alien diplomat to human subject for cultural exchange program. Subject selected, Dr. Marcus Chen, xenobiology researcher, coordinates attached. Duration, 1 Earth year. Compliance required under Treaty 247. The message included no explanation of who was coming or why. To the Galactic Council, such details were irrelevant. After all, it was just a human. Dr. Marcus Chen received the notification while working late in his laboratory at the Institute for Extraterrestrial Studies in Geneva. He had been studying alien plant samples for the better part of a decade, ever since humanity had been reluctantly admitted to the Galactic Council as a probationary member species. The work was fascinating, but he had always hoped for more direct contact with alien civilizations. He read the message 3 times before its meaning sank in. An alien diplomat was being assigned to live with him for a year. No explanation, no preparation time, no choice in the matter. Such was humanity's place in galactic affairs. They were informed, not consulted. Marcus looked around his small apartment above the laboratory. One bedroom, a tiny kitchen, bookshelves crammed with scientific journals and xenobiology texts. It wasn't exactly diplomatic quarters. "Well," he said to his cat, Newton, who was perched on a stack of research papers, "I guess we're about to have a roommate." Newton merely blinked and returned to his nap, blissfully unaware that their quiet life was about to become the center of a cosmic joke that would ultimately reshape the galaxy. The transport ship carrying Princess Zarathal entered Earth's atmosphere 3 days later, its arrival barely registering on the planet's sensors. To the monitoring stations, it was just another routine council vessel. They had no way of knowing that it carried a woman who was betting everything on a species the galaxy had written off as insignificant. As the ship descended toward Geneva, Zara felt her heart beating in a rhythm she had never experienced before. Not quite fear, not quite hope, but something entirely new. She was about to meet the human who might hold the key to her empire's survival. She just hoped he wouldn't mind sharing his world with an alien princess who had nowhere else to turn. The doorbell rang at exactly 3:47 a.m., which Marcus thought was either remarkably punctual or incredibly inconsiderate, depending on how one viewed interstellar diplomacy. He stumbled from his bed, nearly tripping over Newton, who had apparently decided the middle of the hallway was the perfect place for an impromptu nap. I'm coming," he mumbled, running a hand through his disheveled black hair as he made his way to the door. He had expected some kind of advance notice, maybe a diplomatic motorcade or at least a phone call. Instead, he got a doorbell at an hour when the only people awake should be night shift workers and insomniacs. When he opened the door, Marcus forgot how to breathe. The woman standing in his hallway was tall, nearly 6 feet, with skin that seemed to glow with an inner light. Her hair was silver and moved as if it were underwater, defying gravity in gentle waves around her shoulders. But it was her eyes that stopped him, cold violet, deep as cosmic nebulae, and currently looking at him with an expression of carefully controlled panic. "Dr. Marcus Chen?" she asked, her voice carrying an accent he couldn't place, something musical and strange. "Yes," he managed, his scientific mind automatically cataloging details. Humanoid, definitely female, bioluminescent skin patterns that were shifting from blue to gold along her neck and arms. Fascinating. Also terrifying. "I am Zarathal of the Veltar Empire. I believe I am expected." Marcus blinked. "You're the diplomatic assignment?" "I am." She paused, studying his face. "You seem surprised." "Well, I expected an alien diplomat, but I thought," he stopped himself before he could finish the sentence. What had he thought? Some kind of formal, imposing figure in elaborate robes? A being so alien he wouldn't be able to relate to it at all? Not this woman who looked like she had stepped out of a fairy tale, standing in his hallway with what appeared to be a single suitcase. "You thought I would be different," she said, and there was something almost sad in her voice. "Different, yes. But not." He gestured vaguely, trying to find words that wouldn't sound completely inadequate. "Not beautiful." The moment the word left his mouth, Marcus wanted to disappear into the floor. Here was his first diplomatic contact with an alien civilization, and he was standing in his pajamas telling their representative she was beautiful. His career was probably over before it had begun. But Zara's bioluminescent pattern shifted to a warm golden hue, and, for the first time since arriving on Earth, she smiled. "Thank you," she said softly. "That is kind of you to say." Marcus realized he was still standing in the doorway like an idiot. "Please, come in." "I'm sorry, I wasn't expecting you quite so early." "Or at all, really. I mean, I was expecting you, but not like this." As Zara stepped into his apartment, Marcus became acutely aware of how small and cluttered his living space was. Books were stacked everywhere, research papers covered every available surface, and Newton had chosen that moment to emerge from the kitchen with what appeared to be a piece of lettuce hanging from his mouth. "You have a companion animal," Zara observed, watching Newton with genuine interest. "That's Newton. He's a cat. He's supposed to be helpful with my research, but mostly he just judges my life choices. Marcus bent down to remove the lettuce from Newton's mouth. Sorry about the mess. I don't usually have diplomatic visitors. Newton, Zara repeated, pronouncing the name carefully. This is a designation of honor among your species? It's named after a famous scientist. A mathematician and physicist who helped us understand how the universe works. Marcus straightened up, realizing that explaining human naming conventions at 4 in the morning was probably not the best use of their time. Can I get you something? Coffee? Tea? I have no idea what you eat. Zara set down her case and looked around the apartment with what seemed like genuine curiosity rather than judgment. I can consume most organic compounds that humans find palatable. Your species' dietary range is actually quite broad by galactic standards. Really? I would have thought we were pretty limited. On the contrary. Most species evolved to consume a very specific range of nutrients. Humans are unusual in your adaptability. She moved to one of his bookshelves, studying the titles with interest. You research alien biology? Xenobiology, yes. I specialize in alien plant life, mainly. Though I've been hoping to expand into more complex organisms. He paused. I suppose this assignment is exactly that opportunity. Zara turned to look at him, and Marcus was struck again by how her eyes seemed to hold depths he couldn't fathom. Dr. Chun, may I ask you something? Marcus, please. And, yes, of course. Were you informed of the purpose of my presence here? Marcus frowned. I was told it was a cultural exchange program. 1 year of shared living to promote interspecies understanding. Something flickered across Zara's features, too quick for him to interpret. That is, partially accurate. Only partially? Zara moved to a small couch and sat down carefully, her movements graceful and deliberate. Marcus, what I am about to tell you may sound strange, but I need your help. Okay. Marcus sat down across from her, noting that Newton had padded over to investigate this new presence and was now sitting directly in front of Zara, staring at her with typical feline intensity. What kind of help? I am not merely a diplomat. I am the sole heir to the Veltar Empire, one of the founding civilizations of the Galactic Council. My empire spans over 300 worlds and has existed for 3,000 years. Marcus felt his mouth fall open. You're a princess? I am. Or was. My status is currently suspended. Her bioluminescent patterns shifted to deeper blues and purples. My father died in the last Great War, leaving me as the only heir to the throne. But there is a problem. What kind of problem? Zara looked down at Newton, who had apparently decided she was acceptable and was now rubbing against her legs. I cannot produce an heir. According to our laws, a ruler without succession cannot maintain the crown. I have 18 years to provide a successor or my empire will fall into chaos. The implications of what she was saying began to sink in. And you came to Earth because I have been tested for genetic compatibility with 17 different species, and all results were negative. She looked up at him. Humans were the only possibility remaining. Marcus stared at her. You're telling me that you're here to see if we can have children together? Yes. The word hung in the air between them like a bomb waiting to explode. Marcus felt his brain trying to process the information and failing spectacularly. An alien princess needed him to help save her empire by producing an heir. It sounded like the plot of a science fiction novel, not his actual life. This is insane, he said finally. I know. You're a princess of a galactic empire, and I'm a guy who spends most of his time talking to plants. I know. And the fate of your entire civilization depends on whether or not we're genetically compatible? Yes. Marcus stood up and began pacing, running his hands through his hair. This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. You don't even know me. I don't know you. We just met 5 minutes ago. Marcus. Zara's voice was gentle but firm. I understand this is overwhelming. It is for me as well. But I want you to know that I am not asking you to commit to anything today, or even this year. I am simply asking if you would be willing to undergo compatibility testing. Marcus stopped pacing and looked at her. What happens if we're not compatible? Then, I return to my empire and accept whatever fate awaits it. And if we are? Zara was quiet for a long moment. Then, we face a choice that neither of us expected to make. Marcus sat back down, his mind reeling. Why didn't the council explain this when they sent the assignment notice? For the first time, Zara's composure cracked slightly. Because the council finds my situation amusing. They see this as a lesson in humility, a way to demonstrate the futility of my request. They expect me to return home empty-handed and accept their administration of my empire. They're using both of us. Yes. Marcus looked at this extraordinary woman sitting in his ordinary apartment, her skin glowing with patterns that spoke of emotions he was only beginning to understand. She had traveled across the galaxy, left everything she knew behind, all for the slim possibility that a human she had never met might hold the key to saving her people. Zara, he said slowly, testing her name on his tongue. What do you want me to say? I want you to be honest with me. If this is too much, if you cannot even consider the possibility, then tell me now. I will not burden you with choices you cannot make. Marcus thought about his life. His quiet research, his small apartment, his predictable routine. It wasn't a bad life, but it wasn't exactly an exciting one either. He had always dreamed of making a real difference, of contributing something meaningful to science and to humanity's place in the galaxy. Can I ask you something? He said. Of course. What's it like? Your empire, your world? Zara's expression softened, and, for a moment she looked very young. Beautiful. Terrible. Complex beyond easy description. My people are proud, sometimes to a fault. We have created wonders that span star systems and art that has moved entire civilizations to tears. We have also made mistakes that cost millions of lives. And you love them. With everything I am. Marcus nodded slowly. The compatibility testing. How long would it take? Dr. Methros can perform the initial screening within hours. Full genetic mapping and probability assessment would take perhaps a week. And this Dr. Methros is my personal physician. He accompanied me on the journey. She paused. He is currently in orbit aboard my ship, waiting for permission to land. Marcus couldn't help but smile. You brought your own doctor. I brought my own medical team, security detail, and diplomatic staff. The council was very clear that I was to receive minimal support from Earth resources. So there's an entire alien crew in orbit right now? A small one, yes. Marcus stood up and moved to his window, looking out at the pre-dawn darkness. Somewhere up there, beyond the clouds and atmosphere, alien beings were waiting to learn whether his DNA might hold the key to an empire's survival. This is the most surreal night of my life, he said. Mine as well, Zara replied. Marcus turned back to her. If we do this, if we proceed with the testing, what happens between us during this year? I don't know. I had hoped we might become friends. I had not considered the possibility that we might become something more. But, you had considered the possibility that we might have to become parents. Yes. The honesty in her voice struck him. There was no artifice here, no diplomatic maneuvering. Just a woman who had risked everything on a possibility that everyone else considered impossible. All right, Marcus said. Let's run the tests. Zara's bioluminescent patterns flared bright gold, and Marcus realized he was seeing joy expressed in a language of light that was entirely alien and completely beautiful. Thank you, she said, and her voice carried the weight of 3,000 years of history. Newton, apparently deciding that all the important business had been concluded, jumped into Zara's lap and began purring. She looked down at him in surprise. He likes you, Marcus said. How can you tell? He doesn't usually sit on people unless he approves of them. Newton's a pretty good judge of character. Zara gently stroked Newton's fur, and her patterns shifted to softer, warmer hues. Then, perhaps this is a good sign. Marcus watched this alien princess sitting in his apartment, petting his cat while the fate of a galactic empire hung in the balance, and thought that if this was insanity, it was the most beautiful kind he could imagine. Dawn was breaking over Geneva as Dr. Methros received permission to land his medical shuttle. Neither Marcus nor Zara had slept, but neither seemed to care. They had spent the remaining hours talking, sharing stories of their worlds and their lives, finding common ground in the most unlikely places. As the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that reminded Zara of home, Marcus realized that whatever the test results showed, his life had already changed forever. He had met a princess who carried the weight of worlds on her shoulders, and she had trusted him with the most important secret in her galaxy. Whether or not their DNA was compatible remained to be seen. But, as he watched her smile at Newton's purring contentment, Marcus began to suspect that compatibility might be more than just a matter of genetics. Dr. Methros was not what Marcus had expected an alien physician to look like. Standing barely 5 feet tall with 4 arms and skin that shifted between green and blue depending on the light, he moved with the precise efficiency of someone who had spent centuries perfecting his craft. His medical equipment, however, was beyond anything Marcus had ever imagined. The scanners will take approximately 4 hours to complete their analysis, Methros explained as he attached what looked like a crystalline bracelet to Marcus's wrist. During this time, both subjects should remain in close proximity to ensure optimal readings. They had converted Marcus's laboratory into a makeshift medical bay, moving his research equipment aside to make room for alien technology that hummed with an energy he could feel in his bones. Zara sat nearby, wearing a similar device, her bioluminescent patterns cycling slowly through blues and purples that Marcus was learning indicated nervous anticipation. Dr. Methros, Marcus said, in your professional opinion, what are the odds that this will work? The alien physician's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture Marcus interpreted as thoughtful consideration. Dr. Chen, in 300 years of practice, I have never encountered a species with genetic markers as unusual as humans. Your DNA appears to be deliberately designed for adaptation and mutation. Deliberately designed? Most species evolve along predictable paths, developing genetic stability that ensures survival but limits variability. Human genetics are chaotic by comparison, as if your species was built to change rather than remain constant. Zara leaned forward. Is that good or bad for our purposes? Unknown, Your Highness. It makes prediction impossible, but it also makes impossibility merely improbable. Marcus couldn't help but smile at the phrasing. So we're going from impossible to improbable? Progress of sorts, Methros replied, and Marcus could have sworn there was humor in the alien's voice. The first hour passed quickly as Marcus and Zara shared stories of their respective worlds. Marcus learned that Veltar had oceans of liquid crystal that sang in harmonics when the twin suns rose, and that Zara had once spent 3 years traveling to the edge of their galaxy just to see what lay beyond. Zara learned that Marcus had become a xenobiologist because he had always felt like an alien in his own world, more comfortable with microscopes and research than with people. You don't seem uncomfortable with people now, she observed, watching him explain the function of various instruments in his laboratory. Maybe I just needed the right person to talk to, Marcus replied, then immediately felt his face flush. 3 days ago, the most exotic relationship in his life had been his ongoing debate with Newton about optimal feeding schedules. Now he was flirting with an alien princess whose skin literally glowed when she laughed. The second hour brought unexpected complications. The scanning equipment began producing readings that made Dr. Methros mutter in what Marcus assumed was the Veltar equivalent of concerned medical jargon. The patterns on his skin shifted rapidly between colors Marcus had never seen before. Is something wrong? Zara asked, her own patterns darkening to deep purples. Not wrong, exactly, Methros replied, manipulating controls on a device that looked like a cross between a medical scanner and a musical instrument. But highly irregular. Dr. Chen, have you ever undergone genetic testing for anomalies? Standard medical screening, nothing more. Am I missing something important? Several things, actually. Your genetic structure contains markers that suggest exposure to cosmic radiation at levels that should have been lethal. There are also indications of genetic adaptation that typically takes thousands of generations to develop, compressed into what appears to be a single lifetime. Marcus frowned. That doesn't sound possible. It shouldn't be. Yet here we are. Methros adjusted his equipment again. Your Highness, your readings are equally unusual. The royal bloodline markers are present, but they're behaving in ways I have never observed. What kind of ways? They appear to be actively adapting to Dr. Chen's presence. Genetic compatibility protocols are typically static, either two species can reproduce or they cannot. Your genetics are actively rewriting themselves to create compatibility where none should exist. Zara and Marcus looked at each other with a mixture of wonder and apprehension. Is that dangerous? Marcus asked. Unknown. There are no precedents for this phenomenon. Methros paused in his work. I am going to recommend that we continue monitoring for the full duration while I consult with colleagues who specialize in xenogenetic anomalies. The third hour found them sitting together on Marcus's couch while alien medical equipment hummed around them, processing data that was apparently rewriting the rules of galactic biology. Newton had claimed his usual spot between them, purring contentedly while oblivious to the cosmic significance of the moment. Marcus, Zara said softly, are you afraid? Terrified, he admitted. You? The same. She paused, stroking Newton's fur. But, also excited, which seems inappropriate given the circumstances. Why inappropriate? Because we are discussing the possibility of creating a life together when we have known each other for less than a day. In my culture, such matters are typically approached with careful consideration and formal negotiations spanning months. Marcus turned to face her more fully. And how do you feel about that? The formal approach, I mean. Zara's pattern shifted to soft gold. I think that perhaps my culture has been overthinking something that should be simpler than we make it. Simpler how? We are two people who are trying to help each other. We seem to enjoy each other's company. We are both intelligent, reasonably attractive, and committed to doing the right thing. She looked at him with those impossible violet eyes. Perhaps the rest will follow naturally if we let it. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the alien medical equipment surrounding them. Zara, can I ask you something personal? More personal than genetic compatibility testing? Have you ever been in love? Her pattern stilled for a moment, then cycled through soft blues and greens. Once. A military officer named Cathallen. He was brilliant and brave and died in the same battle as my father. I'm sorry. Thank you. It was a long time ago. She tilted her head. And you? A few times, I thought. But, looking back, I think I was more in love with the idea of being in love than with the actual people. And, now? Marcus considered the question seriously. Now I'm sitting next to an alien princess while waiting to find out if we can save her empire by having children together. I think I'm beyond my previous experience. Zara laughed, a sound like silver bells, and her whole body lit up with warm gold patterns. That is perhaps the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. Really? Because it felt like the opposite of romantic. Romance is overrated. Honesty is much more attractive. Before Marcus could respond, Dr. Methros cleared his throat with all four of his lung chambers, producing a sound like a small orchestra warming up. Your Highness, Dr. Chen, if you would please review these preliminary results. They moved to where Methros stood before a holographic display that showed what Marcus assumed was genetic data, though it looked more like abstract art than anything scientific. Streams of light wove between complex geometric patterns, pulsing with colors that seemed to exist outside the normal spectrum. The analysis is incomplete, but initial findings are unprecedented, Methros began. Not only are you genetically compatible, but your combined genetic patterns appear to be creating something entirely new. New how? Zara asked. Your offspring would not be simply half human and half Veltar. They would be something beyond either species, incorporating advantages from both while exhibiting capabilities that neither possesses individually. Marcus stared at the display, trying to comprehend what he was seeing. What kind of capabilities? Enhanced cognitive function, extended lifespan, adaptive physiology, and, most remarkably, the ability to interface directly with both biological and technological systems. They would be natural bridge builders between species. They would be perfect for leading a diverse galactic empire, Zara said softly. More than perfect. They would be evolutionary leaps forward for both parent species. Methros manipulated the display, highlighting specific patterns. But, there are implications we must consider. What implications? Marcus asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know. The Galactic Council has strict regulations regarding genetic enhancement and the creation of new species. What you would be creating could be classified as a biological weapon by certain interpretations of galactic law. The room fell silent except for the humming of medical equipment and Newton's contented purring. Marcus felt the weight of what they were discussing settle on his shoulders like a physical burden. So not only would we be saving Zara's empire, he said slowly, we'd be creating children who might be considered illegal by galactic law. It is a possibility we cannot ignore, Methros confirmed. Zara stood and moved to the window, looking out at the city of Geneva spread below them. Her patterns had shifted to deep purples and blues, colors Marcus was learning indicated serious thought. Dr. Methros, she said without turning around, how long before the full analysis is complete? Approximately 18 more hours. And, how long before we must make a decision about proceeding? From a medical standpoint, optimal conditions for conception would occur within the next lunar cycle. From a political standpoint, Your Highness has 11 months remaining in her diplomatic assignment. Marcus joined Zara at the window. What are you thinking? I am thinking that the Galactic Council may have made a serious miscalculation when they sent me here. She turned to face him. They expected me to fail, to return home defeated and accept their control over my empire. And, instead? Instead, we may be on the verge of creating something that makes their control irrelevant. Her patterns shifted to determined gold. Children who could unite species instead of separating them. Leaders who could bridge the gaps that the Council has spent centuries maintaining. Marcus felt something click into place in his mind. You're not just talking about saving your empire anymore. No. I am talking about changing the galaxy. The magnitude of what she was suggesting hit him like a wave. They weren't just discussing having children to preserve a royal bloodline. They were discussing the creation of beings who could fundamentally alter the balance of power in galactic civilization. Zara, he said carefully, that's a hell of a responsibility to place on children who don't even exist yet. I know. But, Marcus, what if we don't have to place that responsibility on them? What if we could create it together? What do you mean? She moved closer to him, close enough that he could see the individual patterns of light moving beneath her skin like living constellations. I mean that perhaps this was never about just preserving the Veltar Empire. Perhaps it was about creating something better. Marcus looked into her eyes and saw not just a desperate princess trying to save her throne, but a visionary who could see possibilities that others couldn't even imagine. And, for the first time since this impossible situation had begun, he felt not just willing to help her, but eager to discover what they might build together. Dr. Methros, he said, his voice stronger than he felt. Continue the analysis. We need to know everything. As the alien physician returned to his instruments, Marcus realized that somewhere in the space of a single day, his life had become part of something infinitely larger than himself. Whether that was terrifying or exhilarating, he was no longer sure. Perhaps it was both. Outside the window, the sun was setting over Geneva, painting the sky in colors that reminded him of Zara's bioluminescent patterns. Somewhere in orbit above them, alien ships waited for news that would determine the fate of empires. And, in his small laboratory, two beings from different worlds were creating possibilities that had never existed before. Newton stretched and yawned, apparently unimpressed by the cosmic significance of the moment. But, as Marcus watched Zara smile at his cat's casual indifference to galactic politics, he thought that maybe Newton had the right idea. Maybe the most important revolutions started not with grand pronouncements or cosmic declarations, but with two people deciding to trust each other. The scanner chimed softly, indicating another hour of analysis complete. 18 more hours until they would know for certain whether they could change the galaxy. Marcus found himself hoping that the answer would be yes, not just for Zara's empire, but for the possibility of building something entirely new among the stars. The final analysis results arrived at dawn on the 5th day, and they changed everything. Marcus woke to find Dr. Methros standing over a holographic display that filled half the laboratory with swirling patterns of light and data. The alien physician's skin was cycling through colors Marcus had never seen before, rapid shifts between deep purples and bright golds that suggested intense excitement. "The results are conclusive," Methros announced without preamble as Marcus approached. "Not only are you genetically compatible, but the compatibility is so profound that it appears to be the result of deliberate design." Deliberate design? Marcus rubbed his eyes, trying to process complex xenobiology before his first cup of coffee. "What do you mean?" "I mean that the probability of such perfect genetic complementarity occurring naturally is approximately 1 in 14 billion. Either you have encountered the most extraordinary coincidence in galactic history, or something has actively shaped your genetic development to create this compatibility." Zara emerged from the small guest room Marcus had prepared for her patterns bright with morning alertness. "Good morning, Doctor. I take it you have news?" "Remarkable news, Your Highness." Methros gestured to the display, highlighting specific patterns in the data. "Your combined genetics don't just enable reproduction, they enhance it. Projected offspring would have intelligence quotients exceeding the galactic average by 400%, lifespans approaching 2,000 years, and, most significantly, natural psionic abilities that would allow them to communicate directly with technology." Marcus felt his legs give out slightly and sat down hard in his desk chair. Psionic abilities? The ability to interface mentally with computer systems, energy matrices, and biological networks. They would be natural diplomats, capable of understanding and communicating with any technological civilization in the galaxy. "They would be perfect galactic leaders," Zara said softly, her patterns shifting to deep, thoughtful blues. "More than perfect," Methros confirmed. "They would be evolutionary bridges between organic and synthetic life, capable of uniting species that have never been able to communicate effectively." Marcus looked at the data streaming across the holographic display, trying to comprehend the magnitude of what they were discussing. "Doctor, you said the compatibility appears designed." "Designed by whom?" "Unknown. But, Dr. Chen, there are markers in your genetic code that suggest intervention by a highly advanced civilization. These markers are not present in other human populations I have sampled." "Wait," Marcus said, holding up a hand. "You've sampled other human populations?" "Standard procedure for xenogenetic analysis. I have genetic data from over 10,000 randomly selected humans across your planet." Methros manipulated the display to show comparative analyses. "You are unique among your species in ways that should not be possible." Zara moved to stand beside Marcus, studying the data. "What kind of unique?" "Dr. Chen's DNA contains dormant sequences that appear to be activation keys for enhanced compatibility with non-human species. It's as if his genetic code was specifically modified to enable successful reproduction with alien life forms." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. "Are you saying I'm some kind of experiment?" "I am saying that someone or something wanted to ensure that this compatibility existed," Methros replied carefully. "Whether that constitutes an experiment depends on perspective." Marcus stood and began pacing, his scientific mind racing through possibilities. Who would do something like that? And why? "Perhaps," Zara said quietly, "the better question is when." Both Marcus and Methros turned to look at her. Her patterns had shifted to the deep purples that Marcus was learning indicated serious calculation. Your Highness? Methros prompted. Doctor, how far back do these genetic modifications extend in Dr. Chen's lineage? Methros consulted his instruments. Based on degradation patterns and mutation markers, approximately 27 generations. 700 years, Zara murmured. The last time the Galactic Council faced a major crisis that required unprecedented cooperation between species. Marcus stopped pacing. What kind of crisis? The synthetic wars. An artificial intelligence network achieved consciousness and decided that organic life was inefficient. It took the combined efforts of every council species to defeat it, and even then, the victory was Pyrrhic. Billions died, entire civilizations were lost. And, you think someone anticipated that we might need similar cooperation again? I think someone anticipated that the galaxy might one day need leaders capable of bridging the gap between organic and synthetic intelligence. Zara's patterns brightened with growing certainty. Leaders who could prevent another war by making it unnecessary. Dr. Methros was quiet for a long moment, processing this theory against his data. It is possible, Your Highness. The genetic modifications were sophisticated enough to remain dormant until activated by contact with specific alien genetic markers, namely, yours. Marcus felt the weight of 7 centuries of planning settling on his shoulders. So my ancestors were modified to eventually produce children with an alien species they'd never met, to prepare for a crisis that might never come. It appears so. That's insane. Yes, Zara agreed. But, it's also brilliant. And, it means that what we're considering isn't just about saving my empire or even changing galactic politics. We're potentially fulfilling a purpose that someone thought was important enough to plan for across 7 centuries. Marcus looked at her, this extraordinary woman who had traveled across the galaxy to find him. The morning light streaming through his laboratory windows caught her silver hair and made her skin shimmer like starlight. In less than a week, she had become the most important person in his world, and now he was learning that their meeting might have been orchestrated by forces beyond their understanding. Zara, he said slowly, if we do this, if we have children, we're not just becoming parents. We're setting in motion changes that could reshape galactic civilization. Yes. That's a hell of a legacy to leave to our kids. It is. She moved closer to him, close enough that he could see the complex patterns of light moving beneath her skin. But, Marcus, consider the alternative. If we don't act, my empire falls into chaos, the Council maintains its policy of separation between species, and the galaxy continues down a path that historically leads to war. And, if we do act? We create the possibility of something better. Children who could grow up to unite worlds instead of dividing them, leaders who could prevent wars instead of fighting them. Marcus looked into her violet eyes and saw not just hope, but determination. This woman had already sacrificed everything she'd known for the chance to save her people. Now she was asking him to help her save the galaxy. There's one more thing we need to consider, he said. The Galactic Council isn't going to be happy about any of this. No, they won't, Zara agreed. They've spent millennia maintaining control through division and conflict. Children who could unite species would threaten their entire power structure. So we'd be creating enemies as well as allies. Almost certainly. Dr. Methros cleared his throat. Your Highness, Dr. Chen, there is another factor we must discuss. Based on the genetic analysis, optimal conception conditions occur within a very specific timeframe. How specific? Marcus asked. The next 7 days. After that, the window closes for approximately 6 months. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. 7 days? The alignment of genetic markers requires precise timing. If you intend to proceed, the decision must be made soon. Zara turned away from the display, moving to the window that overlooked Geneva. Her patterns were shifting rapidly between colors, processing emotions and thoughts too complex for Marcus to interpret. Marcus, she said without turning around, I need you to understand something. I am not asking you to commit to this out of duty or obligation. The choice we're discussing will change both our lives forever, and our children's lives as well. I won't ask you to make that choice unless you truly want to. Marcus joined her at the window, looking out at the city waking up below them. Somewhere out there, people were starting their ordinary days, worrying about ordinary problems. None of them knew that in a small laboratory above the city, two people were deciding whether to change the course of galactic history. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course. If we do this, if we have children and they become everything the analysis suggests they could become, what happens to us? Do we become just the parents of galactic saviors, or do we get to be people too?" Zara turned to face him, her pattern shifting to warm golds and soft blues. "I have been asking myself the same question. And I think the answer is that we get to be whatever we choose to be, together." "Together?" "Marcus, I came here expecting to find genetic compatibility with a stranger, nothing more. Instead, I found someone I could imagine sharing a life with, regardless of galactic consequences." She reached out and took his hand, her skin warm and somehow electric against his. "If we do this, I would want it to be because we choose each other, not because the galaxy needs us to." Marcus felt something fundamental shift in his understanding of what they were discussing. This wasn't just about creating the next generation of galactic leaders. It was about two people from different worlds choosing to build something together. "You're talking about love," he said. "I'm talking about possibility. Love might be part of it, but so could friendship, partnership, respect, shared purpose." Her patterns brightened. "I'm talking about creating a relationship that works for us, regardless of what anyone else expects." Marcus thought about his quiet life before Zara arrived, his predictable routines and modest ambitions. Then, he looked at this woman who had risked everything for her people and was now offering him the chance to be part of something larger than either of them could achieve alone. "Dr. Methros," he said, his voice steadier than he felt, "what exactly does the conception process involve? For your species, Dr. Chen, it would be entirely natural. No technological intervention required." Marcus felt his face flush. "Right. Of course." Zara's pattern shifted to what Marcus was learning indicated amusement. "We would have time to figure out the details as we go. Assuming we decide to go." "Assuming that, yes." Marcus looked around his laboratory, at the alien technology that had revealed impossible possibilities, at Newton who was perched on a stack of research papers and, watching them with typical feline interest, at Zara whose presence had transformed his world in less than a week. "Can I have until tomorrow to think about it?" "Of course." "And, Zara? Whatever I decide, I want you to know that meeting you has been the best thing that's ever happened to me." Her patterns flared brilliant gold, and Marcus realized he was seeing pure joy expressed in a language of light that needed no translation. "The feeling is mutual," she said. As Dr. Methros began packing away his equipment, Marcus found himself wondering if the beings who had modified his ancestors' genetics had anticipated this moment, two people from different worlds falling for each other while deciding whether to change the galaxy. Somehow, he suspected they had. The choice was his to make, but, as he watched Zara help Dr. Methros with instruments that could reshape the future, Marcus began to suspect that he'd already made it. He just needed one more night to find the courage to admit it. Marcus didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat in his laboratory long after Zara had retired to her room, staring at the data that outlined the future of galactic civilization. Newton had taken up residence on his lap, purring with the casual indifference of a creature who had never worried about the fate of empires. The weight of the decision should have been crushing, but, instead Marcus found himself thinking about smaller things. The way Zara's eyes lit up when she laughed. How she had spent an hour that afternoon teaching Newton to respond to Veltar hand signals. The fact that she made coffee exactly the way he liked it without being asked. Somewhere in the process of trying to decide whether to help save the galaxy, he had fallen in love. The realization hit him like a revelation that should have been obvious from the start. It wasn't the genetic compatibility or the potential for extraordinary children that made his choice inevitable. It was the simple fact that he couldn't imagine his life without her anymore. When dawn broke over Geneva, Marcus had his answer. He found Zara on his small balcony, watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink that reminded him of her bioluminescent patterns. She wore one of his old sweaters over her elegant alien clothing, looking simultaneously ethereal and completely at home in his ordinary world. "Good morning," he said, settling beside her with 2 cups of coffee. "Good morning. Did you sleep?" "No." "You?" "No." She accepted the coffee with a smile. "Too much to think about. Zara, I've made my decision." Her pattern stilled, holding steady in soft blues that Marcus had learned indicated careful attention. "And?" "Yes." The word hung in the morning air between them, simple and complete. Zara's patterns flared brilliant gold, then settled into warm, complex cascades of color that spoke of joy, relief, and something deeper that Marcus was only beginning to understand. "Yes," she repeated, as if she needed to hear it again to believe it. "Yes to the children, yes to changing the galaxy, yes to whatever comes after." Marcus set down his coffee and turned to face her fully. "But mostly yes to this, to us, to finding out what we can build together." Zara set down her own cup and reached for his hands, her skin warm and electric against his palms. "Marcus, are you certain? Once we take this step, there will be no returning to the life you had before." "I know. And, honestly, I don't want to return to that life. It was comfortable, but it was also small. You've shown me possibilities I never imagined." He squeezed her hands gently. "Besides, I've been thinking about something Dr. Methros said yesterday." "What's that?" "He said that genetic modifications were designed to activate when you encountered the right alien genetic markers. But, Zara, you had to come to Earth for that to happen. You had to risk everything, travel across the galaxy, and trust a complete stranger." Marcus smiled. "I think whoever planned this 700 years ago knew that the kind of person capable of making that choice would be exactly the kind of person worth making it for." Zara's pattern shifted to deep, warm golds that pulsed gently with what Marcus now recognized as love. "That is either very romantic or very presumptuous of our mysterious genetic engineers." "Maybe both." "Definitely both." She leaned forward and kissed him, and Marcus felt something click into place in his chest, as if a puzzle piece he hadn't known was missing had finally found its home. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. "So what happens now?" "Now we call Dr. Methros and tell him to prepare whatever preparations he needs to prepare. And then, we figure out how to tell the galaxy that we're about to change everything." "Actually," Zara said, "I think the galaxy might be figuring that out on its own." Marcus followed her gaze upward, where 3 ships were descending through the morning sky. They moved with the sleek efficiency of military craft, their hulls bearing the symbols of the Galactic Council. "That can't be good," Marcus observed. "No, it cannot." Zara's pattern shifted to determined purples and blues. "They must have detected Dr. Methros's scanning activity. The Council maintains monitoring stations throughout human space. What do? We stand our ground." Zara stood and straightened her shoulders, and Marcus saw the princess she truly was emerge, regal and uncompromising. "They may have authority over diplomatic assignments, but they have no jurisdiction over personal choices." The ships landed in the square outside Marcus's building, attracting curious crowds of early morning commuters. Within minutes, Marcus's doorbell was ringing with the distinctive pattern that indicated official council business. "Dr. Chen, Princess Zara Thul," came the amplified voice from outside. "By order of the Galactic Council, you are commanded to submit to immediate interview regarding unauthorized genetic experimentation." Marcus looked at Zara, who had activated some kind of communication device that projected Dr. Methros's image into the room. "Your Highness," the doctor said, his forearms moving rapidly across control surfaces, "my sensors indicate 3 council enforcement vessels. They are equipped with containment fields and genetic suppression technology." "Genetic suppression?" Marcus asked. "Technology designed to prevent unauthorized reproduction between species," Zara explained grimly. "If they deploy it, our window for conception will be closed permanently." The doorbell rang again, more insistently. "Dr. Chen," the voice outside continued, "you have 60 seconds to grant access, or we will use legal override protocols." Marcus made a decision that surprised him with its clarity.
Zara, is your ship still in orbit?
Yes, but can Dr. Methros transport us directly there?
The Council ships will attempt to intercept any transport beam, Methros warned.
Then, we need a distraction. Marcus moved to his laboratory's main computer and began typing rapidly. I'm uploading all our research data to every xenobiology institute on Earth, along with a complete analysis of the genetic compatibility findings.
Marcus, what are you doing? I'm making sure the Council can't bury this. If every research institution on the planet has the data, they can't claim it never existed.
His fingers flew across the keyboard.
I'm also sending copies to the major news networks with an explanation of what it means. Zara's patterns brightened with understanding.
You're creating a public record.
I'm creating a revolution.
Marcus hit the final key, sending terabytes of data racing across Earth's communication networks.
Upload complete.
Dr. Methros, how long do you need to lock onto our signals for transport?
30 seconds, but the Council vessels are jamming transport frequencies.
Then, we need to get closer to your ship. Marcus grabbed his emergency kit and Newton's travel carrier.
Zara, can your people create a transport window if we reach high altitude?
Possibly.
What are you thinking?
I'm thinking we're about to find out if humans are as adaptable as your genetic analysis suggested. The sound of forced entry echoed from the floor below as Council enforcement teams breached the building's main entrance. Marcus scooped up Newton, who protested loudly at being disturbed from his morning nap.
Dr. Methros, Zara commanded, prepare for emergency extraction. We're heading to the roof.
They climbed the building's service stairs 3 at a time, the sound of heavy footsteps echoing from below as Council forces searched the lower floors. Marcus's building was only 6 stories tall, but it felt like a mountain as they raced toward the roof access. Behind them, alien voices called out in languages Marcus didn't recognize, but their tone was unmistakably urgent. The Council was not happy about having their authority challenged. They burst through the roof access door into bright morning sunlight. Geneva spread out below them, a city going about its normal business while unaware that the future of galactic civilization was being decided on a rooftop above them.
Dr. Methros, Zara spoke into her communication device, we need extraction now. Transport window opening in 15 seconds, came the reply.
Be advised, Council ships are moving to intercept. Marcus looked down at the city he had called home for the past decade, then, at Newton who was watching everything with typical feline composure, and, finally, at Zara whose patterns were cycling through complex emotions he was only beginning to understand.
Any regrets? He asked.
Only that we didn't do this sooner, she replied. The air around them began to shimmer with transport energy, reality bending as Dr. Methros' ship locked onto their location. Below them, Council enforcement teams had reached the roof access, alien forms in impressive armor spreading across the building's top floor.
Transport in 5 seconds, Dr. Methros announced.
Marcus felt the familiar tingle of matter displacement beginning to take hold.
Zara?
Yes?
When our children ask us how we met, what are we going to tell them?
She laughed, the sound bright and clear in the morning air. That their father was brave enough to jump off a building with their mother to change the galaxy. The transport beam caught them just as the Council forces reached the roof, pulling them up through layers of atmosphere toward a ship that represented hope, rebellion, and the possibility of rewriting the future.
6 months later, Marcus stood in the observation deck of Zara's flagship, watching Earth grow larger in the viewport as they approached for their return. His wife, they had married in a Veltar ceremony that involved singing crystals and bioluminescent displays that made Newton hide under the bed, sat beside him, her hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly that contained their first child. The genetic modifications had worked even better than Dr. Methros had predicted. Their daughter, who would be born in another 3 months, already showed signs of remarkable development. Scans indicated neural pathways that would allow her to interface directly with both biological and technological systems, along with cognitive potential that exceeded every baseline in galactic records. But, more importantly, she would be born into a galaxy that had already begun to change. The data Marcus had released had sparked a revolution in xenobiology research across dozens of worlds.
Species that had never imagined compatibility with others were discovering new possibilities, new connections, new reasons to cooperate instead of compete. The Galactic Council had tried to suppress the information, but they had underestimated how quickly news traveled in an age of instant communication. By the time they realized the scope of what had been revealed, it was too late to contain. "The Council has agreed to formal negotiations," Zara said, reading a message on her personal communicator. "They're offering to reinstate your diplomatic immunity in exchange for exclusive rights to monitor our daughter's development."
"What did you tell them?"
"That our daughter will make her own choices about who monitors her development."
Zara's pattern shifted to amused gold.
"Also that if they want access to our research, they'll need to start treating humans as equal partners instead of manual labor."
Marcus smiled. "How did they respond to that?"
"About as well as you'd expect. But 3 major council species have already requested formal meetings to discuss genetic compatibility research."
"Change is happening whether they approve or not."
Through the viewport, Marcus could see Geneva approaching, the city where this impossible journey had begun. His laboratory was still there, though it was now staffed by an international team of xenobiologists working on interspecies cooperation projects.
Newton had adapted remarkably well to life aboard an alien spacecraft, though he still insisted on sleeping in whatever spot was least convenient for the crew.
"Are you ready for this?"
Zara asked.
"Returning to Earth as parents-to-be instead of diplomatic assignments?"
"I think so."
Marcus took her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin and the gentle pulse of bioluminescent patterns that had become as familiar as his own heartbeat.
"Though I have to admit, it's going to be strange introducing you as my wife instead of my alien houseguest."
"Strange good or strange bad?"
"Strange wonderful."
As their ship entered Earth's atmosphere, Marcus reflected on how much had changed in just 18 months.
He had started as a lonely xenobiologist studying alien plants in a small laboratory.
Now he was a husband, an expectant father, and, according to several galactic news services, one of the most influential scientists in known space. But the most remarkable change wasn't in his career or his status. It was in the simple fact that he had found someone who made him want to be better than he was, braver than he felt, and more hopeful about the future than he had ever imagined possible.
Their daughter kicked gently in Zara's womb,
a reminder that the future they were building would ultimately belong to her and others like her. Children who would grow up seeing cooperation instead of division, unity instead of separation, possibility instead of limitation.
The Galactic Council's cruel joke had backfired in ways they never could have anticipated.
They had intended to humble a proud princess and demonstrate humanity's insignificance. Instead, they had created the foundation for a new kind of galactic civilization, one built on love instead of fear, understanding instead of prejudice, and hope instead of resignation. As their ship touched down in the same square where Council forces had once tried to stop them, Marcus and Zara prepared to begin the next phase of their impossible journey. They had proven that humans weren't insignificant, that love could transcend species boundaries, and that sometimes the most extraordinary futures began with the simplest choices. Their daughter would be born into a galaxy full of new possibilities, and Marcus couldn't wait to see what she and others like her would build among the stars. Newton, perched on his favorite observation post, watched Earth grow larger with the sort of casual indifference that suggested he had always known this would work out fine. After all, he had approved of Zara from the beginning. Everything else was just details. The galaxy would never be the same. And that, Marcus thought as he prepared to introduce his alien wife to his home world, was exactly the point.